Hello. I wonder if you ever had like this sort of something that looks like a really simple problem or process that actually throws a lot of interesting questions on you. And this talk will, is it talking about that a little bit? And it started out because the National Archives, or the UK Government Web Archive, archived the Tate website. So we don't usually have to deal with that. But as part of this project called Reshaping the Collectible, we did have, all of a sudden, a lot of interest in this one specific microsite that included a series of artworks as well as other content related to it, to those works. And this was a case study that allowed us to learn about web technologies and how to preserve and document this type of objects. And my colleague Sarah Haylett, who was the archivist for the project, did this amazing work of capturing all of these pages using Conifer. Thank you, Rhizome and Web Recorder for that. And we felt, okay, maybe it makes sense to give this to the National Archives. So we had a chat with Claire, who said, yes, this would be lovely and really useful. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. I just want to mention that the three of us are doing the presentation. You'll see Sarah on video because she's in LA and couldn't join us. But sorry, I got lost now. I think, what I wanted to say is that it's the three of us talking this presentation, but actually it was a wider collaboration with different parts of our institutions. And so Jane Kennedy and Chris King at Tate were also instrumental, and Tom Storrar at the National Archives as well. So I'm going to move on to the next slide, which is a video, so a little bit of trepidation there. And this is Sarah Haylett, who's the project archivist and who drove a lot of this work.
Hi everyone, my name is Sarah and I'm an archivist and researcher, and I was responsible for creating the web archiving captures from the Tate side of things during this work. I'm going to provide a little context to the background of this collaborative work and outline some of the questions that underpin both our research and decision-making in practice. While this work broke new ground for both institutions in terms of collaboration, I want to establish that there has been a long-standing professional relationship between Tate and the National Archives. As a public records body that is a non-departmental government organisation that must keep and make accessible the records of its administration, Tate's record management team takes the ongoing selection and preservation of their public records under advisement and guidance from the National Archives. This work, however, was the first opportunity to extend those relationships outside of Tate's archive. But let's start at the beginning and how these digital artworks came to be. I have two timelines to share that plot this evolution. In 2000, as part of the ongoing Tate Modern, as part of the opening of the Tate Modern, and with a substantial sponsorship from BT, Tate launched its website, Tate Online, as the fifth gallery. It was a dedicated online space that intended to function as a truly national museum. The website offered an expanded program that put the collections front and center. It included webcasts, online learning programs, interactive virtual tours of the gallery's collection displays, and dedicated microsites for departmental outputs and specific exhibitions. This was led by a dedicated digital programming team who began to commission net art for Tate Online. Each commissioned artwork can be seen here in blue at the bottom of the timeline. These internet artworks were found throughout Tate Online as and when they were commissioned. All of this is happening as the internet continues to evolve and new media art starts to become a canonical moment in art history. In 2008, the net art commissioning program was rebranded as Intermedia Art and given its own dedicated microsite. The intention of a dedicated microsite was to give this type of curatorial work a dedicated space with contextual essays, a series of podcasts that would better link it with the in-gallery programming and exhibitions. The commissioning programming ended in 2011, and in 2012, Tate Online underwent a second major redevelopment. In this new strategy, which touched on rapidly developing mobile technologies, microsites were no longer considered a digital priority and are left to expire. In 2019, as part of the research project Reshaping the Collectible When Artworks Live in the Museum, the Intermedia Net Art Commissions were chosen as a case study. The intention of this research was to get a better understanding of the tools and processes museums need to collect and preserve internet art moving forwards. When we discovered that all of the institutional records related to the commissions had been lost, the microsite took on a new importance as an institutional record. Due to the redevelopment of Tate Online, it had not been maintained or updated, and elements had stopped working and were no longer accessible, coupled with the fact that a lot of these works were supported by Flash, which was due to be decommissioned. The need to archive the microsite took on a sense of urgency. Tate does not archive its own website in-house. As a government body, the website has been regularly captured by the National Archives since 2004. However, the National Archives' Heretics captures could not capture the full extent of the Flash artworks, and web archiving the Intermedia microsite was not undertaken with the idea to transfer the WAC files to the TNA. We simply tried to capture as much of the information as possible and as quickly as possible in a way that would allow us to still access the artworks. This timeline demonstrates that we didn't reach out to the TNA until the web archiving was well underway. And we realized that Tate's institutional records infrastructure might not be suited to maintain and preserve the WAC files in the context of its overall online presence. We used Rhizome's Conifer tool to undertake the work, and the Tate cataloging links outwards to both the Conifer and the TNA captures. For me, as an archivist, this interdisciplinary work pushed me to expand my single archival focus and to consider other processes and informational needs, not only across departments, but institutions. While Patricia and I kept a spreadsheet documenting the process, what was working and what wasn't, technical information, and how the web archiving played out, in practice, I would advise anyone attempting something similar to keep detailed, shareable notes on every part of the process, as working across such a long timeline meant referring back to different stages regularly. Thank you.
I think that's it. Can I go? Oh, I did not meet. There we go. So I, like Sarah mentioned, I'm the conservator in the team. So my focus is on the artworks themselves rather than the wider website or micro website. And to give you a sense of scale, Tate has at the moment 4 artworks that have web-based elements in them, or 2 of them are literally web art, the other 2 have websites that are related to them and need to be displayed when the artwork is displayed in the gallery. That means I have a slightly different perspective to most of you, who I imagine deal with hundreds or thousands or millions of pages rather than 20. And then our focus is actually mostly on server-side preservation, and we use manual web recording for documentation purposes, because we want to have as many options for preservation as possible. But this means, we have a very small number of artworks, a small number of work files. And because we deal with so many different media, any chance to learn about one specific medium is always a bonus. And I think that for me was the key aspect was we hadn't looked into quality control and, I'm missing the word now, quality control of the work files and their compliance to standards. And so working with the TNA just gave us a full workflow for that, which we are very thankful for and will apply further on. And I think that was the biggest gain. The other thing that was interesting for me, until I figured out it actually doesn't matter as long as people can see these artworks, was this difference between record and artwork, and how web-based artworks just make that very, very blurry, which doesn't happen for other types of artworks in our collection, where it's very clear, okay, this is the sculpture, this is the photograph of the sculpture, and with web-based artworks, that's just not the case, and that's what I leave Claire with.
Hi, so I'm Claire, and I am one of the web archivists at the National Archive. of the UK. So we manage a traditional web archive capture workflow where our contractors MirrorWeb crawl websites remotely on our behalf and host our collection. We'd never integrated WAC files captured by a third party with our collection, so we were really starting from scratch for this project. From a governance perspective, we first of all approached our internal panel on records and collections, which considers requests to transfer material outside the normal selection and transfer process. They agreed that it was acceptable to transfer the files as they were part of the Tate website, and we would have captured them via our regular crawling process if it had been technically possible. Integrating the files with the archive would therefore improve the quality of the archive websites which were available to our web archive users. And it's probably worth mentioning at this point, in case you haven't encountered this before, that our web archive is completely open to the public with no restrictions. Anyone can access it with a web browser from anywhere in the world. The panel didn't feel this decision would impact on our established relationship with Tate for all the other records transfer work and records management work we do with the team. We were clear that we needed to write an agreement to ensure both parties understood what was expected of them, and so future colleagues had a document to refer to so they knew what we'd done and what was agreed. We decided to write a memorandum of understanding, thereafter referred to as an MOU, as that format had worked well for agreements other teams at our organisation have made with third parties. In particular, we wanted to make it clear in writing that copies of the WAC files transferred to TNA were for presentation only, presentation only, while Tate remained ultimately responsible for preserving the artworks. We also wanted everyone to be clear that technical changes outside of our control, such as changes to browsers, could result in some content becoming unavailable in the archive. The MOU includes a clause to review the agreement. So from a technical perspective, we began looking at our current workflows to see which of them we could adapt. We decided to merge and adapt two established workflows. Firstly, our workflow for receiving WAC files from MirrorWeb and preparing them for ingestion into our dark archive for permanent preservation. And secondly, our workflow for transferring WAC files we create in-house using web crawler and browser tricks to MirrorWeb to integrate into the live web archive. The UK Government Web Archive and associated systems are hosted in the Amazon cloud, and we decided to use an AWS S3 bucket to transfer the material. We obviously checked with Patricia that would work for their team first. They work well for us because they're accessible via a browser, and we have granular control over access and security. I have to credit my colleague Tom Storrar for drafting a process along with Patricia, and once it was all okayed, we set up a bucket, and Patricia prepared the WAC files for transfer. Once the WAC files arrived, Tom retrieved them, ran virus check software, ran Wakia, and checked the checksums against those provided by Tate. Once he's established there were no problems, he transferred them to MirrorWeb using our established process. MirrorWeb then merged the WACs with our general collection. At this point, I realised that some of the content was inaccessible in the live archive as it was blocked by our takedown system. I hadn't checked beforehand whether our... I'd assumed that everything was hosted on a Tate domain, but there were things coming in from other places that make the artworks display and had accidentally been blocked. To solve this, Tom ran a query over the CDX files to extract third-party URLs, and we added them to our allow list. I then ran some visual quality assurance checks. This was a bit more complicated than I expected, partly because some of the artworks were already broken when Sarah captured them, and partly because one of the artworks consisted of a deliberately broken and distorted version of the Tate website. This was not something I'd encountered in many years of web archiving QA before, and was a special challenge. I discussed this with Sarah, and she kindly sent me a spreadsheet providing details of the condition of the sites when she captured them, which was extremely helpful. After I'd run the checks, I asked Sarah to run some visual checks of her own, and once we were both satisfied, that finished the project, basically. All the and the websites are now available in the web archive. And you can there see an example of a deliberately distorted and broken version of the Tate website. So as a reflection, this was a great opportunity to test the transfer and integration of third-party creative files. We'd never done it before, but we had thought it was an option for us in the past. It was made easier by the fact we already had connections with Tate at both the records management and governance levels, and as digital preservation professionals, because I already knew Patricia from digital preservation events. The The technical side of the transfer ran smoothly from our side, and adapting our established practices saved time and some uncertainty. In future, I'll ask the transferor to share any information they hold about capturing the content as early as possible in the transfer process, as Sarah's detailed spreadsheet was really helpful. The governance side was more complicated and took long to sort out, mainly because it involved other teams at TNA and they were all really busy. Now we haven't established a precedent for this of using MOUs. It should be quicker in the future. And I'm just going to finish off by extending thanks not only to Tom, who's in the audience here, but also my colleagues Howard Davis and Andy Rowley in our policy and archive sector leadership team for their time, patience and pragmatism, even though they're really mega busy. And thank you very much for listening. You can use our QR codes or our links to view the archive websites and the Reshaping the Collectible research. Thanks for listening.